Hello, Preston community. Welcome to Preston School's fully reopening meeting information session. And we're joined by Dr. Lou Wolf, Superintendent of Schools, Michael Greenfield, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Brian Ladwig, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Christian McCourtney, Supervisor of Elementary Education, Jennifer Egan, Assistant Principal of LMK, Lauren, our very own Lauren Benjamin, Instructional Specialist, and we're joined by board members Lindy Wolverton and Dino Puccio. Well, and of course, hopefully, I'm Dennis Corrigan, proud principal of the Preston Elementary School.
There's no question about that.
So I'd like to begin with sharing with you a bulletin board that we have in our main floor hallway. And this bulletin board captures our mantras, our beliefs, our values here at the Preston School. Each and every day, students get to see that at the Samuel J. Preston Elementary School, we belong together. We want students to know that they matter. We want them to care for themselves, to care for others. We want them to be you, to be them. And this year, we've been focusing on being flexible, rethinking what we know and taking a different perspective. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about and share with you how we are going to move from Husky and Pride students to having Husky Pride. And we're going to keep coming back to this idea of how we transition students from Husky and Pride to Husky Pride. Okay, Dr. Wolf.
Well, good evening, everybody. As I'm scanning the attendees, as always at the Preston School, unbelievable showing and a tremendous number of faculty here tonight. So thanks for everybody being here. Exciting time, a little bit nerve-wracking for all of us, but I think ultimately a good opportunity for us to celebrate for a moment. So behind me, I have, everybody recognize it, where the wild things are. Feel like that's where we have been, where the wild things are. The purpose of this meeting tonight is to introduce you to how we're going to bring all of your children back to school, why we're doing it now, why we think it's safe. There will certainly be some problems and challenges for all of us, but I think by the time we're through, and you'll be able to ask questions until you've exhausted yourselves, we think we've got pretty much everything in hand, but as always, we welcome your feedback and thinking. So our goal is to bring all of your children back to school. That's everybody, K-5, elementary school students, during the week of March 22nd. I'd like to say to you right now, it'll be that Monday. I can't say that yet. Still waiting for finalized delivery of some of the filtration systems that we are so excited to put in place because they're a long-term investment and we think they're going to make our schools healthy and safe for a very long time, well past COVID. In case you're listening at home and you say, what about my middle school, high school students? We hope to be bringing those students back right after the spring break recess, or at the latest, we'll have them all back during the end, just before the end of the third marking period. But I will give you a formal date on that before we close for spring break. So before you go away for spring break, you'll know. A couple of things. You can go to the next slide, Dennis, that's fine. So what are we focused on and why now? I'll share more about why now because many, many, many things have changed. But I will promise you this, and the board would reiterate this thought: we would not bring your children back to school, nor put our teachers in harm's way if we didn't think the plan we have was very, very, very safe as any system you will find. We are very worried about the continuity of learning for your kids. And when I say worried, I mean in the best sense of the word. We never stop thinking about it. So our plan is not to just bring kids back and say, welcome back and turn on the lights. There's so much that has to go into determining where your children are right now at this moment in time. How are our teachers going to make all of those adjustments? And once again, we're asking so much of our teachers, so I hope you appreciate them in the way that I do. And we will be maintaining only 2 instructional models. The hybrid model goes away. You'll either be in school every day, or if you choose the virtual option, you'll be Zooming every day. And then the third and most important leg of the stool, quite honestly, is the well-being of your kids. Some of them have thrived while they were home. Some of them have not. Some of you have thrived while they were home. Some of you have not. We're also thinking about your social and emotional well-being. But as we bring your children back, you will learn tonight about some of the things we've put in place to make sure kids are doing okay, that they feel comfortable, that they feel connected, that they have a trusted adult that they can turn to. So we'll talk more about that as we go on. Next slide, please. So this is just what I said. In the middle of that Venn diagram, there used to say hybrid learning. It's gone. You're going to make a choice. And we're going to ask you to, for the most part, to stay with that choice. You can always return from virtual learning, but when you return, it will be contingent upon whether there is space, whether it'll be disruptive to the kids. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until the close of a marking period, which is something we're going to try to avoid. And you'll be able to reach out to your principals and ask them directly if you change your mind and you're feeling really good and you want to send your kids back. We, of course, want to accommodate that. Next slide, please. So we still are governed by other people. If I could make all the decisions, they might be somewhat different than the ones I get to make. But the governor has prioritized that we get all kids back to school when it is safe. I am saying, based on a number of variables, which I'll go over in a minute, it is safe. So we are bringing all your children back. Next slide, please. Some people have asked me wisely, and it drives Dr. Ladwig and I out of our minds, that we sometimes don't see New York State catch up on the guidance from the CDC or even the World Health Organization, very carefully considered guidance, and New York State is still quite far behind. For example, many of our teachers, because they've been just hitting refresh over and over again, have managed to get fully vaccinated. Well, according to the CDC, people that are fully vaccinated no longer need to go into quarantine when they're exposed. Excuse me. Bless me. So once again, that's because I don't vacuum my house. If I were in my office, this wouldn't happen. So we're waiting for them to catch up, but we are not ruled, unfortunately, by the CDC. We are still governed by the governor and the New York State Department of Health. One of the reasons that I'm so frustrated, as some of you know, is we've spent a great deal of time and energy getting our classrooms safe, and we're being forced to put in barriers, which I think are actually a problem for teachers and kids, but we'll talk about that. Next slide. So this is what I'm excited about. What has changed? Why bring kids back now? Well, the first and most important thing is we've always been concerned about the safety of your children, but children haven't really been nearly as negatively affected by COVID-19 as have adults. And so if you think back to the dark days of summer as we were thinking about reopening school, one of our greatest concerns was the health and safety of the adults in our building, our teachers, our faculty, and our staff. And now that vaccination is available, that's a game changer, highly effective. In addition, with your help, we have lobbied for and received free Binex Now nasal swab testing. So we have begun surveillance testing in our schools. You'll hear more about that from Dennis and Dr. Ladwig later. We'll be implementing in your school. Tonight, if you haven't already given us permission, it would be so helpful if you gave us permission to test your children, because that will help keep them safe and other kids safe. And I'm going to ask at some point tonight, Dr. Ladwig, if you'd put in the chat the links to the video and also the place where people can give permission to allow us to surveillance test their kids. But you see that, go back once, that big honking machine right there, it's just slightly smaller than Mr. Courtwright. It's quite big. He told me my favorite story about it so far. When it came, the kids thought it was an ice cream machine. Apparently they were quite disappointed, and he's going to have to throw an ice cream party to make up. That is the unit that we purchased after extensive research. It cleanses the air 3 to 5 times an hour in a classroom with a full air exchange, and it removes and kills COVID and other bacteria and viruses in the air. So this was a game changer for us because our buildings are old and we relied primarily on opening the windows. This vaccination, surveillance testing, and air filtration are the reasons why I feel more than comfortable in returning our kids to school. I did put a bullet there. We are required, I don't think it's a good idea, and I went and I lobbied with New York State, and they're still considering, we are now going to also have trifold barriers around each student for a host of reasons. I don't think that's helpful because I think kids can't hear as well. Teachers have to project their voices, and also it reduces the amount of airflow in the room. But until they wake up, we're going to go with that. We will maintain the nightly disinfection that goes on, and you'll hear tonight many of the things that you're familiar with will be maintained. Some things will be changed. Next slide, please. So we will continue to have good hygiene in our schools. We're going to have the signs. We're going to still have hand sanitizers and water bottle filling stations. Not anything new there. Next slide.
And just a reminder to continue to have your children bring their own water bottles. It's also a new item that's lost in the lost and found. Besides hat is no water bottles, but please, continue to support that as well.
Very good point, right? So we're going to have all your kids back. Make sure that you remind them of all the good habits they've maintained and kept by keeping our schools safe.
And labeling water bottles is helpful as well as they get lost.
Oh, I see. That's one of our custodians. Yes, we will continue to clean our school facilities every night. We completely disinfect using hydrostatic cleaners, all of our rooms. That will continue. Everything that we use is EPA approved and safe for students, and we'll continue to do all of that. This is critically important. Face masks are probably, above all else, the single most important thing you can do. This little 2-ply mask, if I wear one and you wear one, and we do nothing else, including no social distancing. So all I have to do is this. If you wear it and I wear it, we've reduced the possibility of being infected by 92%. So I want you to think about masking, filtration, testing, all those things combined make for a really strong system of protection for your kids. Couple things to talk about. So let's remember, none of this changes. We have some exceptions. Obviously, when you're eating and drinking, don't wear your mask. I've done that. It makes a big chocolate stain. It looks really foolish. Snacks will occur in large spaces, and Dennis will talk more in detail about this, outdoors or in 2 groups. Parents are encouraged, obviously, to use reusable masks if you want to do that for your kids. If your child forgets a mask, nothing has changed. Don't panic. We have them there. And visitors will continue to be very limited in our school. We want to control the environment as much as we can. Mr. Courtwright, did you want to add anything to that?
Just a reminder that we know as children have various size, smaller faces, that if their masks fit properly, sometimes some of them are either too large or not a perfect fit, so that can be uncomfortable for them throughout the day. So if you can talk to your child's teacher if you think that that's an issue happening, or you can email me or the nurse. Snacks will, as we said, will occur. They'll be in large spaces. Students will be 6 feet apart, and we're going to maximize, as we did in the fall, being outdoors as much as possible to have our snack time.
And hopefully that's going to change now that the weather's changing. You'll be outside a lot more. Next slide, please. So there's a picture of those wonderful barriers. They're mandated. We have delivery of them. They'll begin to be installed very soon. We'll get back. Rebecca, I see your question about lunch. We have a whole section on lunch. So make sure I'm monitoring the chat. So just be with us for a few minutes and we'll get there. Here's where we need your help. So what's going to change for your children? Well, in order to bring them back, they can't possibly socially distance them at 6 feet. That's why the air filtration system to me was essential, because it's the air exchange that determines safety. Air and masks. We're going to do those 2 things. We're going to put these barriers in place, although I don't think they're helpful. They are still, at this moment, until New York State catches up, required. But where we need your help is if you're one of the few families at Preston School that takes a bus and you're able to transport your child, please make sure you do. Dr. Laidwood will be sending out a survey by the end of the week to all parents asking whether or not you're willing to transport your children. We will also be asking a bunch of other questions. One will have to do with whether or not you're a virtual learner and whether or not you want to continue to receive breakfast and lunch from school. All of the information you provide to us is always confidential. And in the event you say you're able to transport your child and suddenly you can't, you can always change your mind. Will you keep the windows open as well? What a good question. You can, it's not necessary. The device works equally well. We recommend that you crack the window so that you're not just cleaning outside air. But you can do it either way. We tested it in both environments. Good question. Transportation, that's what we just talked about. Now, this is a tricky one. Dennis, how many buses do you have in your school?
Two, and one that goes across town.
So not as critical for you, but if you are able to help us by transporting your own child, that will let us keep a single child to a seat. We're going to do everything we can to maintain that. There may be times when we cannot. And it's not a question of money. It's always a question of money, but that's not what would prevent us as I'm looking at the two board members. It's that there aren't more buses available. We can't just say to the bus company, double the number of buses we have available. It's just not possible. So we're going to look at this really carefully. But right now, once we get the data from you, we'll know whether or not we have to put more than one child in a seat. And if we do, it'll always be siblings first if possible. Some of the other things are always been in place. The school bus drivers will still wear masks. If a child forgets a mask, no panic attack. We have them on the bus. We'll take care of it. This is really important, and Dennis reminded me of this. It's going to be more important going forward. You must fill out these daily health screenings. They're going to be critically important for the principal and your teachers and everybody else in your building, because we're going to now bring everybody back, right? We were only monitoring half the number of students. So, Mr. Courtwright, what did you want to add to that?
On the next, no, nothing to add, other than we'll talk about that at arrivals. Children will continue to be scanned, so that's going to be critically important that they're filled out before they get to school.
And I see the thank you from Jonathan, and thank you, Jonathan, for all the information you've been providing me throughout this period of time. Much appreciated. Next slide, Dennis.
Okay, so I can take, so what has stayed the same, will continue to, our doors open between 8 a.m. and 8:50, and students will be scanned. Harrison Street and Taylor Avenue entrances will be for kindergarten through 3rd grade. Blacktop area entrances will be for 4th and 5th grade. 4th and 5th graders, as they do now, will be on the top field and the blacktop area. When it rains or it's inclement weather, they'll come indoors and we'll put them in the designated area. And once the students are inside, now that we have a full school, some of the locations where students wait in the morning will change. Kindergarten will be in their hallways and then in their classrooms. 1st graders will be in the auditorium. 2nd graders will be in the gym. 3rd graders will be in the library and the upstairs computer lab. And Ms. Neese and Ms. Taglione classes will wait outside of their classroom. And so that all of these protocols will be shared with students ahead of time, and we'll explain that later. We'll review them, and we will also, you'll get this updated information in writing before the start of school, the full week.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
Okay.
These are all new things, and just so you know, as we go out this week, tried to highlight most of the new things in purple. And the reason I changed the picture behind me is we're out of where the wild things are, and we are trying to chart a course for your children to come back safely. And you're going to hear all of the hard work that this entire school team has put in, as well as my instructional district level team, working together to make sure that when your kids come back, there is no stone left unturned. So let's talk about lunch, because I'm getting hungry.
Yeah. So there's 3 lunch sites, and they'll be determined by class at each grade level. So we're utilizing our cafeteria. We have brand new cafeteria tables this year. We have 1st floor multi-purpose rooms. There are 2 classrooms, that are used for both instruction and for lunch. And we have a multi-purpose room, a former computer lab on the second floor. So that's where students will be grouped for lunch. And all of the particulars of how we get lunch to them are being finalized as I worked directly with the director of the kitchen, the district-wide kitchen staff at Aramar. Outdoors will be utilized for lunch when weather permits. And we're fortunate that the way our cafeteria blends right into the blacktop area allows us to set up tables for kids to easily transition from lunch to recess. During lunch, 6 feet of distance will be maintained. And in the multi-purpose room, students will still have access to hot lunch and snacks. And
go ahead, Dennis, you go.
And I might hear screams in the West Harrison community because the playground will be open and equipment will also be in use. So I can't wait to tell the kids myself. I'm sure hopefully they may hear this, but this is exciting news. They'll sanitize their hands before they get onto the playground, and they'll sanitize their hands afterwards as well. And they'll play by class. And it's an opportunity for them to reconnect with their classmates they haven't seen, to continue to play with them, and it's an opportunity for them to practice their social emotional skills that they're learning in their classroom. So we're excited.
And just two things to add about the playground. So we're going to try to pilot that before they all get back, so they'll all get a chance to play. I think Mr. Courtwright is actually more excited than the kids because he's missed kickball. So we'll be bringing all of that back. But we're going to also try to keep the playgrounds available for your children on the weekends, but that will be up to you to make sure that they practice best hand hygiene. Because I'm just going to remind us all, we're doing all these things because we can control the environment when your children are with us. We rely on you to keep your kids safe when they're not. Next slide, please.
Okay, so the dismissal times have changed based on the traffic pattern that we've seen and we've learned from our hybrid model, and knowing the number of students that will be dismissing at each grade level and the number of siblings, we needed to change the times. So you can see there, again, you'll get this in writing. So don't worry if you don't capture the times, that this will be sent to you. And 4th and 5th grade will now dismiss first, and they'll dismiss in class order, and we'll tell you that class order so that when you're waiting outside, because Preston has, it's mostly a walking school. Most students are picked up and dropped off. And so we want to make that safe. We want to make sure that you know how the process will be. So Miss Nehemiah, Miss Paul's class may go first, and then followed by Miss Sirocco, followed by Miss Regano. So you'll know the order and you'll know how to line up outdoors. And also a reminder that when you're on school property, especially at dismissal, as we bring 300 families to dismissal, is to please have your face mask on. We thank many families who have been doing that. That keeps everyone safe. It's good modeling for students. It also keeps our faculty and our teachers safe who are dismissing and interacting with many parents at the door. So
that is so important. That is so important, and that we don't want to make that a challenge. So please do everything you can to not congregate in ways that will make it a bad example for kids or a risk to others. Two things before Dennis goes on. If you put your question in the Q&A, one of the panelists will answer it. And once that answer is published, everybody can see it. In addition, I noticed that there was a question about whether or not there would be barriers on the lunch tables. And the answer to that question is no, because we're going to maintain 6 feet of social distancing for children during lunch. We are not going to limit their social distancing when they have their masks off for a longer period of time.
And while I know that the playground is a place that may be possibly opened for the weekend, I would ask that after school, once dismissal, and in years prior, it was a place that I would tell new families to Preston, go meet new families, go meet families and children there after school. But at dismissal, we do need to leave right away and not congregate at the playground at this time.
Dennis, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. Angela, we don't have an answer for the state's foolish behavior on barriers. We're going to do the best we can. I'm hoping that we're going to get them to change their mind over time. That's my answer to that. Unfortunately, I've been in lots of places where this is already in place, where the barriers are in place, and it is an added strain on the kids and the teachers, but I was unsuccessful in getting that changed. Dennis, how many children will be at a table when they're eating lunch?
Right now, it depends on the size of the table. It's either 3 or 2. So
Okay.
depending on the size of the table.
Thank you. Back to you, my friend.
Okay. So some other changes that you should expect. So the schedule would change. The 6-day cycle schedule right now, the schedule is it's AA, BB, CC. Now it'll be consecutive. So starting on March 22nd will be an F day. That means March 23rd will be an A day. March 24th will be a B day, and so on. Your child's class schedule may change as well. Orchestra and band will occur as lessons only, and we'll talk more about that in a later slide. AIS, if your child received reading or math support, Ms. Mandragona, Ms. Etri, or Ms. Karasoulis, and if they received resource room speech, counseling, OT, all of that will occur on site in school unless your child is a fully virtual student.
Excellent. And my colleague and Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources has been working tirelessly with all 6 principals to put in COVID surveillance testing. Dennis, do you want to talk about this a little bit and say how it's going to work? And maybe then, Brian, you can weigh in wherever you need, including when it's going to start. You saw the video was placed in the chat if you want to see what the testing looks like, as well as your opportunity to allow us to test your kids. It doesn't work, folks, if only a handful of people allow us to do the testing, because we'll be testing the same kids over and over, and that won't work. So please, I promise you it's safe and it's private. Dennis, what do you want to say about this?
Well, and on that note, I'd say right now, only 52% of our student population, we're the lowest school percentage-wise in the district. And so I asked that, we consider that so that we can have a greater pool of students in that random selection. The drive-through, it's going to be a drive-through site, which will, you'll line up on Taylor Avenue and you enter through the circular driveway. We'll start at 8 a.m. There'll be a tent there. The nurse will greet you. She'll perform a swab, which you can see on the video of how quickly that will be done. And then we'd ask that you return in about 15 minutes so we can give you the results. If your child tests negative, then they enter school and they go about the school day as normal. If your child tests positive, we'll give you those results. And we ask that they have to isolate and quarantine, and we'll follow up. They should follow up with their primary care physician.
Brian, is there anything you want to add to that, Dr. Ledwig, in terms of when it will start or anything else of that nature?
Certainly, thanks. We anticipate that the testing will begin at Preston School on Monday, so that the families that are identified to participate on Monday will get an email on Thursday with some more information and some more details. One thing I will share is we rolled out the drive-through testing at Purchase School today as a test, and we tested 19 students, and I'm pleased to say that from grades K through 5, it was a great success. There were no tears. Kids were great, tremendously cooperative, and parents were really cooperative, and so we look forward to the same at the Preston School community.
Brian, the question was, she didn't hear the date. Is it this coming Monday?
Yeah, a week from today. Yeah, it'll begin at Preston a week from today, and then we anticipate every Monday thereafter.
Great. And would you share, I know we field tested this week, or was it last now, the high school?
We field tested the high school last week and today as well. And out of those totals, about 80 students and staff were tested. Thankfully, all of them were negative. We'll be rolling it out at LMK school tomorrow morning at 7:15. Preston on Monday, and then the other elementary schools, Parsons and Harrison Avenue, will begin starting next week as well.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to underscore, if we can, if you have any questions about that and you were hesitant about having your child randomly tested, you could reach out to me and I can answer any questions that you have regarding that.
By the way, that testing applies to our faculty and staff as well.
So,
Great slide. I love this slide.
so, I want to tell you a story. A fifth grader shared with a faculty member that, while they're excited to see their friend that they haven't seen in over a year, they're concerned about the loss also of the tight-knit community that they built during this time. So students have identified themselves as Husky or Pride, and we acknowledge that we have to reestablish that we have to redefine the we as we talked about. At Preston, as you know, it's written everywhere. Our mantra is, care for yourself. You'll hear the kids, you may have heard your children say, managing my impulsivity. We've talked about metacognition. Why am I feeling what I'm feeling? What do I need to learn something best? This year, we focused on being flexible, caring for others, practicing empathy, really listening with an open heart, and then caring for Preston, the physical place that we learn every day. And the kids have been really good about this. And we're talking about building connections, and this is how we're going to do that. All of our students will enter a supportive environment, a welcoming classroom. They nurture and their relationships are developed through class meetings where they have read alouds. They get to talk about what they're interested in. They get to share something they're excited about or nervous about. I'm going to show you some examples of student surveys that teachers take to get a pulse of how kids are feeling, both socially and academically. It's an opportunity to learn explicit skills of social emotional skills like the ones I just described. What does empathy really look like? What does it really look like to manage your impulsivity? We partner with the Harrison Youth Council, and they have targeted not only grade levels, but also groups of students and providing them an opportunity to practice and learn social emotional skills. Mrs. Concolina, our school psychologist, works with students in the Lunch Bunch group. And these are groups of students who are working towards a common goal. And when when this plan needs to be more intensified, when something isn't perhaps meeting the needs of your children, then we develop specific plans with the school psychologist and of course with you in mind. Together we do that as well. So this is how we're going about that.
And before you switch that slide, Dennis, just a couple of observations. The team has been really monitoring students and their well-being throughout this, and so many surprises to us. So sometimes kids who did really well in in-person learning didn't do so well in hybrid learning, and sometimes the opposite was the case. But there's been a lot of talk about the social and emotional well-being of kids, and I will remind us all, including myself, that children are very resilient, and then there are kids who are just really wounded. And this pyramid is a great example of scaling up the level of intensity based on the individual child. So not every child has been traumatized. Certainly children are unhappy and sad, but we try to always be mindful of the kind of vocabulary we apply to how kids are doing. We have a phenomenal faculty. They're well prepared to welcome your kids back, but we're going to incrementally increase the level of support and service necessary based on your kids. And before we go on, I want to remind you that the most important ingredient that's going to bring your kids back is the imagination of the faculty and staff. Behind me is an artist rendering of one of my favorite stories called Apalamondo's Dreams, and the significance of having big dreams. They're going to really blaze new trails. I'm certain your teachers are a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit frightened, as they should be. And you need to remember that they're going through this with you. And so the more we are able to partner and to share our creativity and suggestions with one another in ways that are respectful, not hurtful, I think that's going to benefit our children tenfold, because we are about to approach a brand new day in public school. We've never returned children from a pandemic before. Next slide, Dennis. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I missed highlighting our very important school aides who also play a major role.
Oh my gosh, you're not kidding. They've been terrific throughout this entire time.
They have been highly creative, attuned. They've given me very important feedback about how your children are feeling and about their relationships among each other. So they're very attuned to your children, and they have been really heroes during this whole time, really.
That's a good word. Thank you for using it.
So here's an example of what I was describing earlier about student surveys. So here's an example from 5th grade. Every Monday, they check in and say, so how are you feeling? What are your emoji emotions? What happened over the weekend? How are you entering this week? We try to celebrate Mondays as a school. What can we look forward to learn this week? We don't want children to think we just get through the week and we celebrate Fridays. And also, as important, we recognize that all learning is social and emotional. And so there's a question here around, fractions. So what do you understand about fractions? How are you feeling about that? And all that's important information for us because we can, that helps us plan and deal, not only just about the content, but that informs how we're going to teach that to your children. Ms. Benjamin's going to describe this.
So for our students to be able to do this and to accurately assess themselves and give us the feedback that impacts the way in which we continue with our instruction and supporting the environment, we need to teach into these skills. So here is Mrs. Cassidy's class really looking at what does it mean to be flexible and reflecting upon that and teaching into the skills of what does it mean and what type of thinking needs to occur during that time. And therefore, once we've done this, our kids can give us accurate information that gives teachers a way in to make decisions as to who to support, how much to support, do we need to shift here, do we need to pivot there?
Yeah, no, but I walked into this classroom actually recently, and I told the kids, I'm sorry, for recess we have a change of plans. And one student said, that's okay, we have to be flexible. We're just so happy to be in school. We're grateful, he said, actually, to be in school. And so we shared that actual moment over the loudspeaker the next day. That's something we try to be intentional about, is share these moments with the entire school so kids know with real examples what these ideas look like.
And you people model flexibility. I should share with the 130 some of you on this chat that this entire weekend was devoted to constantly changing this document to try to make it more parent friendly. And I had a wonderful conversation today around 2 o'clock with Christian McCourtney, our director, our supervisor of elementary ed, and Lauren, your extraordinary instructional coach. And what we realized is that your teachers have done such an amazing job of helping kids to understand what it means to be flexible and to adapt. And so that gives us a lot of hope as they go through this next big transition. You'll hear more about that we need to continue to remind them that being adaptive, being reflective is critically important. So we try to model that behavior, but I was very proud of the team as they kept working at how do we make this more accessible for parents so it doesn't just sound like edge of research. Next slide.
Okay, so what does it look like when we're welcoming all students back that first week, those first few days? So some things, we're going to review the safety protocols with them. We're going to teach them how to navigate the building. Now with more students in it, we're going to establish and reestablish the classroom community by classroom meetings, doing read alouds. We'll have a Preston Spirit Day, probably on the first official day that everyone's back. We're going to ask everyone to wear their Preston apparel. That'll be a feel-good moment. I'm going to create a video for students, so just like I did at the beginning of this school year, so that they know what to expect when everyone is fully back. We're going to teach social emotional skills that is relevant and important at the first few days of school. And then there'll be grade level specific activities. Kindergarten kindergarten will do an activity that's different from 5th grade, but it's all in the spirit of reestablishing our classroom community.
Dr. Ladrig, while we're going along, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A that maybe you can respond to. Thanks. So we're very proud of our physical education program. They, in many respects, are so deeply connected to everything that is appropriate and useful about social and emotional learning. They don't just teach physical education, they teach how do you work as a team, how do you collaborate, how do you problem solve together. And we're very proud of this program. And so much of what they do deals with all of those units. So you're going to see some in person, and the all virtual option will be dictated by different limitations, quite obviously. And this slide will be available. We're going to post this after the meeting on our website. And Dennis is also taping this entire presentation to make it available for the rest of the parent body who wasn't able to be here tonight. Is there anything anybody wants to add to that? No? Nope. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So let's talk about music, because there are some changes there. Dennis, you want to handle this one? Elementary.
Yeah, other than, well, I'll start with just saying that band lessons will occur. The students will be 12 feet apart as they play their instrument, their band instrument. Strings will be 6 feet apart. And so we've located where the lessons will mostly occur in our auditorium, which we're lucky to have. So that's where the students will practice. And they will not be able to, unfortunately, at this time, be able to practice as an entire band or orchestra.
Yeah, and we are purchasing some specialized covers that go over all of the wind instruments that prevent particles from escaping when the kids are playing the instrument. So that should also further enhance the safety protocols. But I don't know about you folks, but I miss seeing school concerts and plays. It's a big part of my life that's been missing.
Yes. And unfortunately, chorus at this time will not occur as well. I know if that's a question.
As soon as it gets warmer, we're going to find a way, folks. So stay tuned.
Okay.
So we puzzled over this because your principals love their students, your teachers love their students, but they also have to stay sane. So we want you to think really hard about when you select the virtual option. If you choose it, for the most part, we want you to remain virtual. However, if you decide for good reason that it's seeming like this is going to work for you and you want to bring your children back, we're never going to prevent you from bringing them back, provided that it doesn't disrupt the classroom instruction that's in place. It doesn't require reorganizing classes. But so try to be in direct contact with your principal if you have this question or concern. And of course, Dennis will listen to all of the variables and make the most appropriate decision he can to support your students.
And just want to highlight that last minute requests can be a challenge to honor. So if you're hesitant, if you think that your child won't attend school that day and that perhaps they need to be virtual, that if you can do that, give us lead time. It's to maximize everyone's experience, both your child, the children who are learning at home and the children who are learning in person. Last minute requests are a challenge for classroom teachers because they want to make sure that your children have the materials, that they have what's accessed to them so that they can learn that day. So last minute is a challenge for us. So we ask that you let us know as soon as possible. And just as you fill out the daily COVID questionnaire, it does ask if you've traveled. So please, as we know, another vacation is coming up and you need to follow the New York State quarantine guidelines that are currently in place unless they're updated and revised. We're going under the current guidelines by the New York State Department of Health. And if you are planning to travel and you have any questions about that in terms of what the quarantine rules are, you can contact the school nurse and she'll guide you through that process.
And just let me say a word about vacations, folks. When we talk about vacation, we're talking about officially sanctioned school vacations. So listen, we know that it's been hard on lots of families and people are trying to get away because they haven't been away for a long time. But that's not a burden we want to push on to our teachers. So when we talk about vacation, if you should go away for spring break, then you should quarantine as is appropriate and then return to school. But we're not suggesting that people should go off in the middle of May and visit a family and go virtual. We're not trying to be disrespectful, but it's not a matter of convenience. It's a matter of need. And there's a big difference. And the other thing I want to highlight is in the old model, you would be Zooming in every other day, whether you were a virtual or a hybrid student. In this model, if you're a virtual student, you will be permitted to Zoom in every day. And if you are a quarantine student, you'll be permitted to Zoom in. Those are the circumstances under which you can Zoom in.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me of that. That is really students who are quarantining as a result of a precaution. Those students are allowed to Zoom in. Anything outside of that, I ask that you can send me an email or a school nurse and review the rationale for requesting to Zoom in on a particular day if it's not related to a quarantine.
I'd like to introduce my assistant superintendent for instruction, Mr. Greenfield. And this is a complicated slide, but I like it. And this is why I like it, because I like you to understand that this is not an organization that makes decisions by the seat of its pants. We are always thinking 5, 6, 7 steps ahead, because quite honestly, we're not really thinking right now about bringing your kids back to school in March. What we're thinking about is how do we connect March, April, May, June, July, and August to a successful return to school full-time under more normal circumstances in September. And so I'd ask Michael to take us through this, because there are some things that you will be, I think, relieved to know. Things we did last year to make this year better, anticipating this return. Mr. Greenfield?
Thank you, Dr. Wool. And you made a few statements along the way about no stone unturned, or everything you ever wanted to know about instruction. And this slide tries to compress all that we do into a single slide. And moreover, it's a process that has 5 steps. We are extremely thorough. Our faculty is extraordinarily expert in what they do. Our leadership team is working in the background to make sure that we have the latest research, and we use expertise beyond our own internal capacity to ensure that we know what we know, that we can verify our observations of student learning. And in the end, what we hope to do is build a system that serves the entire student body in a very personalized way, or as personalized a way as is humanly possible. And we work as a collaborative team to make that happen. To Dr. Wool's point, to Lou's point, we're looking at September when we work backwards, and we start building our program as early as December. And this year, we've been monitoring the progress of your children along the way. We've gone further, though. We've engaged an organization, a leading national research institute called Hanover, to partner with our already established partner in NWEA. And you may recall that we administer something called the MAP assessment 3 times a year in language arts and math. And we do that to monitor students' progress and to take a benchmark of how they're doing against how they should be doing against standards. This year, we went further. We engaged this research organization to look back, and we engaged them first in May and June of last year. And we used that as a baseline study. Then we engaged them again to do a study in the fall to project, based on national sampling data, how students are projected to do under conditions of pandemic. That's a very generalized approach to research. And then we had them come back last month and study the actual student performance. So we measured the projected against the actual. Well, the reason why I'm going into some depth here is so you understand how thorough, how careful we are trying to be in determining how to build our summer program, how to first return students at the end of March April and May and June to make sure that the instruction is the most effective it can be academically to support every one of your children in the most personalized way possible. And then also to build a summer program that we are designing that would further advance their growth throughout the summer months. And then, of course, look at how September might look different as a result of this year's hybrid learning model. So I'm going to take a pause and ask Dennis to go to the next slide, because I wanted to give you a little bit of a more digestible format for this roadmap. We have a 5-step process. We conduct research, we design program, then we engage in action research, which is basically like a lab environment in the summer. We implement these programs that we've developed, and then we assess, adapt, and adjust based on the feedback we get from student learning, from teachers, from parents, and from the students themselves. As I said to you before or earlier, that we conducted this 3-year review of our achievement results using Hanover Research and the NWA map. We're also collecting classroom assessment data from teachers with looking at student work, and teachers with their expertise are observing students, which there's no replacement for. Teachers know your children. Our teachers are experts. They are very tuned. They've had incredible opportunity to get to know, as they've told us, small groups of students in ways that Ms. Benjamin and Mr. McCourtney are going to talk in more detail about, how what we've learned from the hybrid learning model and how that hybrid learning model has actually been rewarding and beneficial. And in one case, the teacher observations have shared that teachers have observed that this has been a benefit of the hybrid learning model. The next step is, and we are currently in the process of redesigning our summer programs based on this comprehensive analysis of student performance data and teacher feedback, and obviously the research that has come out over the last several months. The design process looks at both student programs during the summer, and last year, by way of example, more than 250 students participated in more than 25 different sections of program. That doesn't include all of the programs we offer. We've had more than 500 faculty participants in our in-service program, and that is there and intended to support teachers, teaching students, and preparing for September. So when you ask the question, so how are you preparing my children, my child, for the reopening of school? How are you preparing them academically? These are the 5 steps that we go through in an iterative, comprehensive way throughout every summer. The teacher professional development is in a lab environment. Teachers are constantly innovating, checking their practice, redesigning, taking feedback from students, and then implementing. We see that as a great benefit of our summer programs. Obviously, they're developing curriculum during the summer. They're adapting their lessons. And we have published last year, and we'll continue to publish online resources to support students during the summer, obviously in the spring, during the summer, and as we go into the fall and the school year. And lastly, and this is something that happens not in a linear format, but in a more iterative and cyclical way, we assess and we adapt and we adjust. We use our faculty meetings, we use our monthly professional development meetings, and our teachers lead study groups and workshops throughout the summer and throughout the year to support this work. So in a nutshell, how are we preparing your child for the reopening of school shortly, and hopefully by the end of March and in September? This is the comprehensive approach we take. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Christian McCourtney, who's our supervisor of elementary instruction, and Lauren Benjamin, who's one of our instruction specialists, and you know her well because she works at Preston School and focuses her attention mostly there, but she works across the district. Christian?
Dennis, just leave this slide up for 1 second, and I'm so excited because I got to work with Christian and Lauren this afternoon and hear their thinking. But I was just reflecting on how Dennis and Lauren reminded us how important it is for kids to be flexible and adapt. And all of those values are reflected here. And whether or not we have a successful moment in time is determined based on whether or not we can be flexible and adapt. And here's what I want you to be excited about. This gets me excited. The fact that we know where your kids are right now, the fact that we had somebody come from the outside and look at where they were and where they are and where they should be is really, really important. So I'm excited to hear from Christian and Lauren. Take it away, new slide.
And I just want to also add the impromptu meetings in the hallways about reading and teaching math that make us late to all our meetings. You know, those are the adjustments, the redesign.
You'll get no forgiveness from me, Mr. Cartwright.
So I just want to say, like, the teachers are always thinking, okay, what is it? And that's been the benefit of being obviously in school versus when we were virtual, that these unscheduled meetings occurred and they happened throughout the school day, and all of that has informed what was just described.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Wool and Mr. Greenfield. It's a source of pride that I have an opportunity to address this audience tonight as a former faculty member of Preston and one-time instructional coach there. Ms. Benjamin and I are going to try to give you a closer look of what Mr. Greenfield just described and what it can appear like in Preston School. I'll borrow from one of the phrases I heard from Mr. Greenfield, in that our teachers know their students and know our students and your children. And that has been repeated back to me a number of times this year by teachers specifically from Preston as well as across the district. They really feel that they know your students this year, and that's a strength that we're going to leverage as we go into the reopening phase. Our teachers cite our small class environments that have been a part of our hybrid learning model as one way that they've been able to see, understand, and know your children perhaps more rapidly than they were able to do in the past. And so they've developed a real strong sense of community, as has been alluded to throughout this presentation, within those cohorts. And we recognize that there's still room to work to develop that sense of community across the two cohorts. We're not waiting until school reopens to begin that work. That work has already begun. We also have already begun and have been doing all year long assessing students within the classroom in order to design personalized instruction, or instruction that meets the needs of individuals through a variety of different structures that we use to teach. What we also use our assessments for is to determine if there's any critical elements of our curriculum that need a little further attention. Our teachers work to embed that in units of study as they continue to progress through our academic calendar. So, Ms. Benjamin, if you wouldn't mind highlighting for us a few moments where that's occurring in the Preston School right now.
Thank you. So when we're thinking about building on the best of the hybrid learning, I want to share with you that one of the aspects is the social emotional connection. Mr. Courtwright, can you please advance the next slide? Thank you. So we have spent time building community, and our kids identify right now as Husky or Pride. I'm a Husky student, I'm a Pride student, and our teachers really see the value of the strong student-to-student connections that have been made, the student-to-teacher connections that have occurred. We know their learning styles, their interests, and each student as an individual. What our fifth grade teachers have done, they have strategically chosen kids from both the Husky and Pride groups to form book clubs. And here we see Mrs. Kerman's, I would say, cross-cohort book clubs, where kids are still learning and growing together, not only within their own cohorts when they're in school, but they have the opportunity to do that across the two cohorts, which is going to be really important as the next couple of weeks come by and we start to combine ourselves as Husky Pride cohorts. They have already had these experiences, so the connections are already there to start building upon them. And then when we go to our next slide, we are looking at an example of how we're building from the best of the hybrid learning, the personalized learning through teacher and student assessment as well as self-assessment. Here's an example of our fourth graders and our teachers. We're curious. We want to know, what do our kids already know? What do they want to learn? What do they think about themselves as learners? This information is so important to our teachers. We want to know how kids feel about themselves as learners. This helps to guide our teachers about their decisions about instruction, as well as how to support our social emotional needs of students. So here we see in that self-assessing example that if students tend to pick their favorite thing that they're studying, we have a lot of kids loving the Iroquois and the Age of Exploration, we know that they're making some sort of connection and enjoying that. If we're seeing maybe that they're not picking multiplication and division as their favorite, that gives us an opportunity to reflect, what are we doing differently? What is coming across differently to our students? And what can we do to build some more interest in maybe another area? These are all pieces of that self-reflection that can really support the growth as we go back.
Hey, Lauren, the one thing you said to me, could you go back one slide? Because I've been talking to lots of parents with all kinds of anxiety, and you and Christian did that revisiting old concepts. So I had my own difficulty getting my head around it. It's almost as if teachers are expected to know where your child is, what they've mastered, where they're struggling, while still moving everybody ahead. I say that out loud because I want to remind people the challenge of being a teacher, and certainly the challenge of being a teacher able to do those things. And I'm very grateful that both you and Christian acknowledge the complexity of the work that these people do. So thank you. Just need to get it in there.
So we know that we can't learn all there is to know about a student through one self-reflection or through one assessment, and thus we use what we label multiple measures, or multiple opportunities to assess student learning to help drive instruction and eventually programmatic decisions. This wheel illustrates some of the different avenues that we use to collect information about our students. In the top left corner, you see NWEA map. That has already been alluded to by Mr. Greenfield, and that's a place where we use an external measurement system to determine how students are doing in specific skill and strand areas, as well as how they compare to national groups of students. In the classroom, we collect artifacts. We look at our local assessments, both given during units of study and at the end of units of study, as well as those student reflections that Lauren just introduced us to help us make more personalized instructional decisions throughout our day. Teachers do this routinely. We also set up opportunities for this work to occur during PD sessions. We take all of that information as an instructional team and include teacher feedback to help us drive decisions that are more programmatic in nature. Next slide, please. So on the immediate horizon, we have our spring trimester about to open up, and we're going to be bringing students back. And we really want to focus, as we've said before, on developing that community. But our teachers are excellent at that. And I don't sense that that will take a great deal of time for them to create those connection points across the two cohorts. They are also excellent at creating engaging and personalized learning experiences. One example that I've seen most recently in Preston was just last week when a second grade teacher asked students to design a mathematical model of multiplication. There's multiple access points just in the design of that mathematical model. Regardless of where your sense of understanding was in multiplication, you had a starting point. And then they were asked to design a story problem based on the model that they created and give it to and present it to one of their classmates. While the kids were having a ton of fun trying to stump their classmates, they may not have realized how much understanding they were gaining around the concept of multiplication and the language used in story problems. These kinds of things will help them as they prepare for the fall next year. And really everything that we're doing from now until that fall is in preparation for the fall. Inclusive in that preparation is our summer programming. I'll get into the specifics of what we are planning for students in just a moment. But an important element of our summer programming is our summer professional development, in which we offer a variety of courses that teachers take. And they look at what has transpired with students in terms of data, what's the most recent research that we have to support best instruction and pedagogical practices, and then applying that to the students they expect to have the following year, so that they're ultimately extremely well prepared for the fall and for the children that they will have in the fall. Next slide, if you could, please, Mr. Corbett. So some exciting things that we are planning for this summer as a result of our data analysis is that we want to create a program that's somewhat similar to our summer extension program from last year, where we supported students based on their needs. So this is an invitation program. We would invite students in that are demonstrating a need in their ability to maintain some foundational skills and concepts, and also to develop a deeper understanding of important aspects coming out of kindergarten through 5th grade, so that they are prepared to access the instruction at the next grade level. We want to make sure that everybody has an option over the course of the summer, because we recognize that this pandemic has affected all students, regardless of whether or not you are at risk or struggling to access all of the information that you're being taught. All students are affected in some way, and thus we are creating enrichment workshops. These workshops look to run for about a week long, are hosted by a teacher, and are based on interest and inquiry-based experiences. So we are considering different options, which would include perhaps an engineering course in which students are making like a balsa wood bridge and testing the force on it, perhaps a reader's theater, and perhaps a computer applications course that would end in some sort of coding experience. So these are all things that we're trying to build towards. And we would want to create opportunities for all students to take those enrichment workshops, which includes the fact that if I am a student who's been invited into the foundational concepts and skills program, that I would still have an opportunity outside of that experience to take one or more of these enrichment workshops. Lastly, we're looking to build in community connection events where we bring entire school communities or invite entire school communities together to develop connections both vertically throughout the grades as well as horizontally across the grade. We find that these moments can be both fun, exciting, and community building.
Before you go on to the next slide, just want Mrs. Wolverton, who is the chair of the Budget Committee for the Board of Education. Those three things may look familiar to you.
Oh, yes, we have already been talking about how this will be implemented and how we'll be able to provide these programs to our students this summer. It's part of the bigger picture, really.
Yeah, so I remind people this is not a sales pitch, but everything that we do is predicated on your continued support. And this was in my first presentation about 2 weeks ago as part of the superintendent's overview. And Christian did an excellent job of explaining the 3 different entry points we want to have for your children come summer. So this is trying to really address the needs of all children in a very comprehensive way. So thank you, Christian. Thank you, Lindy. Next slide.
We've come to a close of this meeting, this information session. I think we can go on and on about all of this work. Well, I'd like to thank my colleagues for helping put this together and for thinking with me, for the teachers who are in the audience who do a heroic job each and every day, to the custodial staff. We have an outstanding custodial staff who's helping us prepare our school aides, our nurse, our office staff. I want to give them an acknowledgement as well. I want to thank you, the families, for listening. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to either email me you will receive a lot of what we discussed in writing, so you can prepare ahead of time, and your classroom teachers will let you know about schedules in particular.
And a commercial, Dennis, before, don't let them leave. And when you're done, stop sharing your screen because I want everybody to see the whole panel.
Yeah, and I just want to end with at least to say that, you know, it's an honor and a privilege to be the principal of Preston School. You know, interesting, I'm the one who's learning every day. I know you send your children to learn, but I learn by listening to them and by watching them. So it's a joy and it's fun. And again, as always, as we do, you know, don't hesitate to contact me if any of this is, you have further questions as a result of this
You can
presentation.
stop sharing your screen for 1 minute. And I just want everybody to stick around for a minute because I think there are some things I want to remind people of. First of all, I want to thank Dennis for being a phenomenal, dedicated, proud, relentless principal. His relationship with kids inspires me every time I see him working with children. Never seen anybody more motivated or inspired by the children he works with. And that makes a difference every day in the lives of kids. And Lauren, you're an incredibly important partner, as are the teachers who I see lined up in this presentation. I also want to thank our board and for their tireless support. They attend everything. Their pay is a bottle of water, and tonight they have to buy their own water because they're at home, but they're here, and they're here because they care about your kids. Now I want to just say a couple things that are not going to be that easy to take. So we're going to do the very best we can to bring your kids back safely. We need your help. And those are not words. We need your help. We are not seeing infection spread in our schools. We've seen it spread in our communities. And when it happens in our communities, it shuts our high school down primarily. So you need to help us and keep your family safe by adhering to just good common sense. And then the other thing I want to say is I've gotten a lot of criticism, which is kind of my job. People always have a better idea, and I'm used to that. And sometimes they actually do. But somebody said to me in a nastygram I got a couple of weeks ago, why didn't you buy the air filtration system sooner? Because they didn't exist sooner. Then I had somebody make a really snide comment. One of the lenses fell off of the new machines and said, these must be really slipshod. Shame on that person, because we went over and above to buy you, your children, the best and most advanced technology available on the market today. I wouldn't be bringing your children back. I would not be bringing your children back with barriers and masks. The filtration systems, to me and to our board, who expended close to $750,000 to put them in place, because they're essential. We are going to make mistakes. Some of us are going to be inconvenienced. Teachers are going to have new challenges. You're going to have new challenges. Whether or not we get to graduation successfully is going to depend on how much we care about and provide patience and grace for one another. I get paid to get criticized. Teachers do not. Principals do not. Parents do not. We need to be in this together. It's going to be hard. It's going to take time. It's going to take listening. But I can assure you of this. I don't care where you're looking. Look at any other district. We didn't buy Home Depot air filtration systems. We bought the only filtration system that I could find on the market that met every single safety criteria for your children and our faculty and staff. We put in the surveillance testing. We've lobbied to make changes to legislation. We've worked to study your actual kids to make sure we knew where they were, where they are, and where they need to go. We're building a budget that will make sure the summer program you need is in place. It's not just for kids who are at risk. The summer program is for all kids. Our teachers will be unhappy with some of the changes. They're losing their Mondays. Yes, they are, because when we bring all kids back, we're not able to accommodate all that. We'll do the best we can to give them time and space. I say this to you often. My job is not to make everybody happy. It's to make the best decisions for the 3,600 kids that go to school here. Sometimes that requires tough decisions. Here's what you will know I will never compromise on: the safety of your kids or the safety of our faculty and staff. We haven't compromised on that. We won't. We're going to need your help. Look for the survey that's coming shortly. Give grace to those around you. Ask questions before you criticize. Help. Lift everyone up. Thank you all for being here, all 132 of you. Thanks to every member of my team for their work day and night throughout the weekend. Thanks to our board. Couldn't be prouder to reopen our schools with you. And we look forward to seeing your children in person soon.